I am so afraid. Every morning I wake up and the fear is the first thing I feel. But I cannot let them see it. If I give them my fear, what do they have to stand on? I say go girl every morning not because I feel strong. I say it because I am hoping that one day if I say it enough times, they will say it to themselves.
She was crying. Not the kind of crying that comes with noise. Not the kind that asks for attention. The kind you do with a towel pressed tight against your face at midnight, so your children don't hear. She had just lost her job. She had 3 children asleep in the next room. She had $42 left in the world. And tomorrow morning, she would wake up, walk to that cracked mirror on the wall, straighten her shoulders, and smile. Because that is what she did. Every single day. They called her reckless. They called her stubborn. One neighbor once said, "That woman is too loud to be a good mother." But years later, those same people sat in silence, watching her children become everything they once said was impossible. This is the story of Miriam. One mother, no husband, no savings, no miracle waiting. Only a phrase she repeated to herself like a heartbeat. Go, girl. Keep moving. And what happened inside that house, behind those closed doors, is why every parent alive needs to hear this story. Because sometimes, the strongest people you will ever meet are the ones crying where no one can see. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's go back to where this story really began. Her name was Miriam. She was 29 years old when life sat her down without asking permission. Her husband, the man she had believed in, built with, prayed beside, woke up one Tuesday morning and chose to leave. No warning, no argument the night before, no note on the kitchen table, just absence. 3 children remained in his place. Emeka, 7 years old, bright eyes, too serious for his age. Adez, 5 years old, all laughter, all questions. And baby Chukwudi, barely 8 months, who still slept on his mother's chest and knew nothing yet of the world he had entered. Miriam had no savings, no car, no powerful relatives to call. Only a small rented room, 3 children, and a mountain of fear she refused to let her face show. The morning after her husband left, her neighbor saw her hanging laundry outside. "Miriam," the woman said slowly, "are you okay?" Miriam turned around and smiled. A real smile, eyes steady. "I am more than okay," she said. The neighbor blinked, then walked away confused. Because Miriam had made a decision, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the silence of that bathroom the night before. She had looked at herself in the cracked mirror, looked for a long time, and then whispered the words like a secret contract with herself. Go, girl. Then she had gone to sleep. And in the morning, she worked. She cleaned offices before the sun came up. She sold groundnuts and chin-chin by the roadside in the afternoon. She washed other people's clothes at night. And still, somehow, impossibly, she found energy to help Emeka with his arithmetic. Still found energy to braid Daisy's hair into neat cornrows. Still found energy to clap and cheer when the children scored well on a test, as if they had won an Olympic medal. "Mom, it's just a class test," Emeka once said, embarrassed by her celebration. She grabbed his face in her hands. "There is no such thing as just anything you work hard for. You hear me?" He nodded. He didn't fully understand then. He would understand later. Outside the home, people talked, the way people always do about a woman who refuses to collapse. She is doing too much. A woman like that will raise confused children. Who does she think she is? Where is her husband? Miriam heard it all, every word, and every word became fuel. She never argued with them, never defended herself publicly. She just returned home, stood in front of that cracked mirror, and whispered her phrase, "Go, girl. Years folded into each other the way they do when someone is working too hard to notice time passing. Emeka was now 10. Adai's 8. Chukwudi had learned to walk, then run, then ask questions that had no easy answers. Life was not comfortable, but it was alive. There was food most nights. There was laughter on weekends. There were bedtime stories Miriam invented herself, pulling them from air and memory. And then, one winter evening, everything nearly broke. Miriam came home from work later than usual. Emeka had heated the leftover beans. Adaizi had bathed Chukwudi without being asked. They were proud. They looked up when she walked in. She smiled at them, cooked a little more rice to go with the beans, asked about school, laughed at Chukwudi's story about a lizard in the classroom, tucked them all in, pressed her lips to each forehead. Then she sat on the edge of the bathroom and allowed herself to fall apart. Because that morning, her supervisor had handed her a slip of paper. "The company is downsizing, Miriam. We're very sorry. Your last day was today." She had nodded, said thank you, walked out into the street, stood for a moment in the sun, then straightened her shoulders, and went to pick up her children. But now, alone in the bathroom with the tap running, she was terrified. Rent was due in 6 days. The electricity bill was overdue. Baby Chukwudi needed new shoes. She had $42. She pressed the towel to her face and cried until her body had nothing left. Then she washed her face, looked in the mirror. "Go, girl," she whispered, and she slept. The next morning there was no breakfast, only tea. Emeka noticed. He was 10 and already watchful. "Mom," he said quietly, "are we okay?" Miriam looked him directly in the eye without flinching. "We are more than okay." But they were not. Not yet. Days passed. She found temporary work. A few hours here, a few hours there. Cleaning, cooking for a canteen, braiding hair on weekends. But the collectors came once. Adaiz heard them shouting outside the door. Heard words like overdue and notice. That night, the little girl climbed into her mother's bed. "Mommy," she said, voice small, "are we poor?" Miriam was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled her daughter close. "No," she said softly. "We are training." Adaiz looked up. "Training for what?" "For everything that's coming next, and it's going to be good. I promise you." The girl fell asleep in her arms. Miriam stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, planning, refusing. If you're still watching up to now, type, "I'm still here," in the comments section. Because what is coming next will shift something inside of you. What nobody outside those walls knew, not the neighbors, not the relatives who whispered at family gatherings, was that Miriam kept a notebook. Small, brown cover. She had bought it from a stationery stall years ago for almost nothing. Every night after the children slept, she wrote in it. Not poetry, not grand declarations, just truth. Just the raw, undecorated record of survival. She wrote things like, "Today was very hard. I am afraid, but they must not inherit my fear. I made Emeka repeat his multiplication tables 3 times tonight. He was frustrated. So was I. But I kept my voice steady because his confidence is more important than my exhaustion." Adaiz asked why some children's fathers take them to school. I didn't have a perfect answer. I told her, different families walk different roads. Ours is just faster. She filled page after page, year after year. But growing up brought new battles. One afternoon, Emeka came home and dropped his school bag on the floor with a sound that filled the room. Miriam looked up from ironing a neighbor's clothes, her evening side job. "Talk," she said simply. "I want to stop school," Emeka said. "Kingsley's uncle said he can get me a job at the motor garage. It pays real money." "I can help you, Mom." Miriam set the iron down. She crossed the room slowly and sat in front of her son. "Look at me." He looked. "You think helping me means leaving school? You're tired. I can see it." "I am," she said quietly. "I am very tired. But do you know what would make me more tired?" She paused. watching you waste the mind God gave you because you were trying to rescue me. Emeka swallowed. Protect your future before you protect me, she said. That is how you help me. That is the only way. He didn't speak for a while. Then he picked up the school bag, and he never mentioned the garage again. It was Adazi's turn next. She walked through the door one afternoon, and something about her was different, collapsed somehow. She sat down and looked at the floor. Miriam placed a cup of water in front of her and waited. They laughed at me. Adaz finally said, "In school, I said I wanted to be a doctor one day, and they laughed." One boy said, "Poor kids should stop dreaming." The room was very quiet. Miriam stood slowly. She walked to Adaz and placed both hands on her daughter's shoulders. She turned her, gently but firmly, toward the small mirror on the wall. "Look," she said. Adaz looked. "What do you see?" "Me." "Look more carefully," Miriam said. A long pause. "That face," Miriam said, "belongs to someone dangerous." Adazi blinked. "Dangerous? Dangerous to limits? Dangerous to people who think they know what you can or cannot become?" She leaned down. "That boy who laughed? He laughed because your dream threatened him. Small people mock what they cannot reach." Adaz stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. "Say it," Miriam said softly. "Go, girl." Miriam smiled. Again. "Go, girl. Now say it like you mean it. Go, girl." Louder, surer. Something shifting behind her eyes. Then there was Chukwudi. The youngest was the hardest in a different way. Where Emeka was disciplined and Adaize was passionate, Chukwudi was restless. By 13, he was picking fights, coming home late, answering back, getting notes from teachers. One night Miriam sat him down. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why are you doing this? What are you so angry about?" He was quiet for a long time, then, barely above a whisper, "Because everyone at school has a father, and I don't even know where mine is." The room went still. Miriam did not look away. She did not cry, not in front of him. "That pain is real," she said. "I will never tell you it isn't, but pain is not a personality. It is something that happened to you. It is not who you are." He looked at her. "You can carry that pain like a weapon," she continued, "and use it to destroy what we have been building. Or you can carry it like a scar, proof that you survived something hard. The choice is yours. But just know, I did not suffer this long for you to waste what I was building for you." Chukwudi said nothing, but the fight stopped, slowly, then completely. The years passed the way they do when someone refuses to stop. Miriam was now in her early 40s. Her hands were rough from years of labor. Her back ached most mornings. Her eyes got tired faster than they used to. But she never announced sacrifice. She never sat her children down and said, "Look at everything I am doing for you." She just did it. Quietly, completely, every day. She skipped meals and told them she wasn't hungry. She wore the same 3 dresses on rotation for 2 years so the children could attend school events in clothes that didn't shame them. She worked through a fever once, wrapped a cloth around her head and showed up at the canteen, because missing a day meant missing that week's rent contribution. Nobody knew, not even the children, not fully, not yet. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday. Miriam was at the canteen, on her feet since 5 in the morning, when the world tilted. One moment she was lifting a pot. The next, she was on the floor. The other women rushed to her, called for help. The doctor at the clinic used words Miriam didn't want to hear. Exhaustion, stress, malnutrition. "You have been running on nothing for too long," he told her. She was admitted overnight for observation. Emeka, now 19, in his first year of university on a partial scholarship, took the bus 3 hours to reach her. Adez, 17, sat by the hospital bed and held her mother's hand and said nothing, because sometimes there are no words. Chukwudi, 15, stood in the corner of the room and stared at his mother's face and felt something inside him reorganize forever. They had never seen her like this. Horizontal, small, quiet. She had always been the one standing. Emeka leaned close. "Mom, how long have you been like this?" She smiled, a little tired, a little embarrassed. "I'm fine." "Mom, I am fine, Emeka. This is just the body asking for rest. I will rest, and then I will get up." She squeezed his hand. "Go," she said. "Go back to school. That is what I need from you." He cried on the bus back, hands over his face, shoulders shaking. The woman beside him pretended not to see. While Miriam was in the hospital, Daisy stayed behind to tidy her mother's room. She swept. She folded the worn dresses. She straightened the cracked mirror. And then, while reaching under the mattress for a sheet, her hand touched something. A notebook. Small, brown cover. Nearly full. She sat on the floor, and she opened it. The first entry was dated 12 years ago. "Today I had only enough food for 2 servings. I gave both to the children and told them I had already eaten." Emeka looked at me for a long time. I think he suspected. I smiled until he stopped looking. Adaise turned the page. "I am so afraid. Every morning I wake up and the fear is the first thing I feel, but I cannot let them see it. If I give them my fear, what do they have to stand on? So I take it to the bathroom and I leave it there. I walk out of that bathroom a different person." Another page. "Adaise asked me today if we are poor. I told her no. We are training. I don't know if that was the right thing to say. I only know it was the truest thing I had. Page after page, bill after bill, tucked between the writing, crossed out, paid, struggled over, prayer after prayer. And then, near the end of the notebook, one entry that stopped Adaise completely. "I say go girl every morning, not because I feel strong. I say it because I am hoping that one day, if I say it enough times, they will say it to themselves. That they will find it inside them without needing me to be there. If they become kind, disciplined, and brave, then every single tear was worth it." Adaise closed the notebook, and she sat on her mother's floor, and she wept. Not the cry of sadness, the cry of understanding, because all those years, she had thought her mother was strong, a natural fighter, a woman built different. But the notebook told the truth. Her mother had been afraid the whole time. She had been exhausted the whole time. She had been uncertain the whole time. She had just refused to let that be the loudest thing in the room. Miriam recovered. Of course she did. She came home. She rested. For the first time in years, she actually rested, because the children would not allow otherwise. Emeka called every day. Adaise cooked. Chuck Woody, the one who had once stood in corners angry at the world, now sat beside her every evening without being asked. "Mom," he said one night, "I want to start a business one day." Miriam looked at him. "What kind?" "I don't know yet, but something that fixes things." He paused. "Like you." She laughed. A real, full, unguarded laugh. The son became an engineer, not by luck, by that relentless voice inside him that said, "Protect your future before you protect her." The youngest opened a logistics business that fixed broken supply chains for local manufacturers. He called it, and this is true, Go Boy Logistics. And Adaise became a teacher. Not just any teacher. The kind students remember decades later. The kind who looks a struggling child in the eye and says, "That face belongs to someone dangerous." On the day she gave her first major public speech at an education conference, she asked Miriam to sit in the front row. Miriam came in her good dress, one of only 2 she owned. Simple, clean, dignified, hands still rough from all those years. The hall was full of academics, policymakers, people with titles and credentials. Adaise stood at the podium. She looked out at the room. Then she looked at her mother. "I want to tell you," she began, "about the best teacher I ever had." She told them about Miriam, not the polished version, the real version. The $42, the midnight crying, the towel, the cracked mirror, the notebook. The room was completely silent. "This woman," Adais said, her voice steady even as her eyes filled, "gave us more than money. She gave us identity. She gave us a voice we could trust. She gave us the ability to stand in hard rooms and not collapse." She paused. "I want to ask you something." She looked out at the audience. "How many dreams are alive right now because one tired parent refused to quit?" Nobody moved. Then, in the third row, a man began to cry quietly. Then a woman near the back, then another, then more. Because in that question, people heard their own mothers, their fathers, the grandparents who worked decades of hard labor so that someone, eventually, could stand in a room like this. The unrecorded heroes. The ones history does not monument. The ones who deserve flowers now, while they can still smell them. Miriam sat in the front row, hands in her lap, head slightly bowed, looking, as she always had, a little embarrassed by too much attention. Adais gestured to her. The room stood. Not polite applause, a standing ovation, long, full, the kind that means something. Miriam stood slowly, smoothed her dress, looked around at all those faces. Then she leaned toward the microphone, and she said 4 words. "Go, girl. Go, boy." So tell me honestly, what would you have done in Miriam's place? When the job was gone and the rent was due and the children were asking questions you didn't have answers for, what would you have done? And have you ever known someone like Miriam? A parent who carried everything quietly so others could carry nothing. A guardian who never said, "Look at what I sacrificed," but whose sacrifice you can see. Now that you're old enough to look, if this story reminded you of someone, share it with them today. Send it to the mother who is still building. Send it to the father who shows up even when he is exhausted. Send it to anyone who ever sat in a bathroom at midnight and pressed a towel to their face so no one would hear. Because some heroes are still alive, and they deserve their flowers now. If this story moved you, please like this video. It takes 1 second and it helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story that matters, and leave a comment below telling me who this reminded you of, because real listeners always leave a mark. Until the next story, keep moving. Go girl, go boy.